Anakin entered Palpatine's office with his mind full of doubts that had tormented him for weeks. The Chancellor received him with that paternal smile that always calmed him. But today something seemed different in the air. Palpatine began to speak about the dark side of the Force with a disturbing intimacy, revealing secrets about the power to avoid death that no Jedi had ever mentioned. The words flowed from his lips as if he were describing something he himself mastered, not just knew from ancient stories. Anakin felt a shiver run down his spine when he realized the truth that had been before him all along. The man he had trusted, to whom he had turned in his darkest moments, was a Sith Lord. The discovery hit him like lightning, making his world crumble in an instant. His fists clenched as he tried to control the mixture of betrayal and anger that surged within him. He left the office, his mind spinning with the magnitude of the revelation he had just witnessed. He needed to tell Master Windu immediately. The entire Republic was in danger in that man's hands. His hurried steps echoed through the Senate corridors as he tried to process everything he had heard. That's when his communicator vibrated, and Padme's voice came trembling from the other side. She said something was different, that she felt contractions, that she thought the baby was coming. Panic took hold of Anakin with overwhelming force, his nightmares returning with brutal intensity to his memory. In his dreams, Padme died giving birth, and now that terrible moment was approaching. He stopped in the middle of the corridor, feeling the ground slip from under his feet, torn between two impossible duties. Anakin stood paralyzed there, torn between his duty as a Jedi and his love as a husband. Normally, he would have run to Palpatine for the help he had promised, but now he knew the Chancellor was his enemy. The cruel irony of the situation suffocated him as he tried to decide what to do. He couldn't leave Padme alone, not when she needed him most, not when his worst fears were about to come true. He thought about sending a quick message to Windu about Palpatine being a Sith, but ran toward Padme's apartment. His mind was so confused he could barely think straight, oscillating between the terror of losing his wife and the urgency of protecting the galaxy. But in that moment, Padme was all that mattered, and nothing else in the universe could compete with that. When he arrived at the apartment, he found Padme holding her belly, her face pale but determined as always. She smiled when she saw him, despite the evident pain in her eyes, and that smile almost broke Anakin's heart. C-3PO and R2-D2 were around her, trying to help but clearly lost about what to do. He gently helped her into the ship, piloting carefully but quickly to the nearest maternity ward. Throughout the journey, he held her hand tightly, whispering words of comfort he could barely believe. The doctors took her immediately, and Anakin stayed by her side, wearing the sterile clothes they handed him. The following hours were the longest and most terrifying of his life, each of Padme's cries of pain echoing in his soul like torture. He prayed silently to the Force, begging that his dreams would not come true, that she would survive. Then a baby's cry filled the room, and one of the doctors said it was a healthy and strong boy. Anakin looked at the tiny creature they placed in Padme's arms, and something fundamental changed inside him at that exact moment. "Luke," Padme whispered with tears streaming down her face. "Let's call him Luke." The baby had closed eyes and small clenched fists, so fragile and perfect that Anakin felt tears stream down his face uncontrollably. Nothing else mattered in the entire universe, not Palpatine, not the war, not the Jedi, only that small being who was his son, half him and half Padme. He touched the baby's cheek with trembling fingers, amazed by the softness of his skin. But before he could fully process that overwhelming revelation, Padme screamed again, and the doctors moved quickly around her. Another baby was coming, they said, surprised. They were twins they hadn't detected before. Minutes later, a girl was born, crying loud and strong as if announcing her arrival to the world with all authority. "Leia," Padme said with a weak but happy voice, "Our little Leia." Anakin took the baby in his arms and saw in her eyes all of Padme's strength and determination, that fire that had made him fall in love from the first moment. He had two children, two precious lives that depended on him for protection and love, two reasons to live that changed everything. Padme, exhausted but radiant with happiness, reached out to him and asked them all to go to Naboo, away from the war and the intrigues of Coruscant. Anakin agreed without hesitation, still completely numbed by the emotion of seeing his children, wanting only to stay by his family's side and never leave them for anything. In that moment, he completely forgot about Palpatine and the danger he represented. His mind focused only on protecting those three beings who were his entire world, his reason to exist. The small house in Naboo was near Padme's family, surrounded by green fields that stretched as far as the eye could see and the soft sound of the nearby lake. It was simple and welcoming, very different from the luxurious apartments of Coruscant or the grand halls of the Jedi Temple. Anakin carried Luke while Padme cradled Leia, and both seemed finally at peace for the first time in years of war. The days passed in a peaceful routine of caring for the babies, changing diapers, waking up in the middle of the night with their crying, learning to differentiate when they were hungry or just wanting attention. Anakin discovered that being a father was more challenging than any Jedi mission he had ever faced, but also infinitely more rewarding than any military victory. He watched the twins' every movement with fascination, marveled by each small smile or yawn, each time their tiny fingers closed around his. The war, Palpatine, the Sith, all of that seemed to belong to another life, to another Anakin who no longer existed. Padme was recovering well from childbirth, gaining strength with each passing day, and her mother came to visit them frequently, helping with the babies and bringing homemade food. Padme's family received Anakin with genuine affection, even knowing he was a Jedi and that their marriage was forbidden by the Order's rules. Here in Naboo, away from the watchful eyes of the Council and the political intrigues of the Republic, they could finally be just a normal family. Anakin spent hours holding his children, feeling their presence in the Force, so bright and pure it almost hurt to look directly at it. Luke had a calm and contemplative energy, as if he were already observing and learning about the world around him. Leia already showed signs of a strong and determined personality, complaining loudly when she wanted something and not accepting to wait. He told them stories even knowing they didn't understand, whispered promises that he would always protect them, that he would never let anything bad happen to them, that he would be the father he himself never had. But peace couldn't last forever, and Anakin knew it deep in his mind, no matter how much he tried to ignore that warning voice. He had abandoned Coruscant without adequate explanations, ignored several calls from the temple, left Obi-Wan without news for entire weeks. His old master must be worried, perhaps even thinking something terrible had happened to him during some mission. Guilt began to gnaw at Anakin at the edges of his happiness, growing a little more each day, but he pushed it away whenever he held Luke or Leia. Padme noticed the moments when he became distant, lost in dark thoughts, and held his hand firmly, bringing him back to the present with her touch. She also knew they would eventually have to deal with the consequences of their choices, face the Council and explain everything, but for now they just enjoyed those precious days. The simple house in Naboo had become their sanctuary, a place where they could pretend the rest of the galaxy didn't exist, where they were just husband and wife caring for their children. It was almost 2 weeks of complete isolation before Obi-Wan finally managed direct contact through a secure channel. The familiar voice of the Jedi Master came through the communicator, concerned but visibly relieved to hear Anakin respond from the other side. He had returned from Utapau after defeating General Grievous and ending the Separatist leadership, only to discover that Anakin had disappeared without leaving a trace. Anakin felt the weight of guilt tighten his chest like a vice, recognizing the genuine concern in his old master and friend's voice. He asked Obi-Wan to come to Naboo, that they needed to talk in person about something extremely important that couldn't be discussed by transmission. Obi-Wan agreed immediately, his curiosity and concern evident even through the distorted transmission. Anakin turned off the communicator and looked at Padme, who held the sleeping twins in her arms, and knew it was time to face the truth he had avoided for so long. When Obi-Wan arrived at the small house a few days later, his face showed complete shock at seeing Padme with the babies in her arms. Anakin received him with a tight embrace, feeling the tension in his old master's body, and then led them inside the house. There, with Padme sitting beside him holding Leia while he held Luke, Anakin finally told everything without omitting any detail. He spoke about his secret marriage to Padme, about the pregnancy hidden for months, about the horrible nightmares that tormented him showing her death in childbirth. He told about the conversation with Palpatine and the shocking discovery that the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic was actually a Sith Lord, probably Darth Sidious himself, whom they had been seeking. Obi-Wan listened to everything in silence, his face going through a series of emotions as he processed the magnitude of those explosive revelations. When Anakin finished, there was a long moment of heavy silence, broken only by the soft sound of the twins' breathing and the distant singing of birds. Obi-Wan finally spoke, his voice mixing disappointment at breaking the code with understanding for the impossible situation Anakin found himself in. He held Luke carefully, extreme care as if the baby would break at the slightest careless touch, the old Jedi Master's eyes softening as he looked at that tiny face. "Anakin, you should have told me much earlier," he said gently but firmly. "We could have found a solution together. You didn't need to carry this weight alone." But Anakin knew there was no solution within the rigid rules of the Jedi, not for a deep love like his for Padme, not for the desire to have a family. They talked for hours about Palpatine, about what that meant for the Republic and for the Jedi, about how the Sith had deceived them all. Obi-Wan was visibly disturbed by the revelation, understanding now how the Sith had manipulated everything from the beginning, each move carefully planned. He needed to inform the Council immediately about Palpatine, but promised Anakin he would try to protect him from the consequences of having broken the code. After all, discovering the Sith Lord's identity was infinitely more important than punishing a Jedi for marrying and having children. Anakin felt immense relief at sharing the weight of those secrets with someone he trusted completely, someone who had always been by his side. The minutes in Naboo continued peaceful while Obi-Wan remained with them, helping care for the twins with surprising tenderness and discussing strategies about how to deal with Palpatine. But the peace was brutally shattered when a patrol of clones appeared near the house without prior warning. Anakin felt the danger through the Force a fraction of a second before the blasters fired at them. He moved with superhuman speed, pushing Obi-Wan aside forcefully while the blue energy shots passed buzzing where his old master had been moments before. The betrayal cut deep as he realized the clones, soldiers who had fought by his side for years in countless battles, were now trying to kill them without hesitation. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber with pure reflex trained by decades, deflecting the shots that kept coming in a constant barrage, while Anakin did the same, his blue saber glowing intensely in Naboo's daylight. The confusion was total as they tried to understand why loyal soldiers had suddenly become assassins. The battle was quick and brutal, with Anakin and Obi-Wan moving in perfect synchrony like in the old days of war. They disarmed the clones one by one, Anakin using the Force to tear the blasters from their hands with precise gestures while Obi-Wan advanced with the calculated precision of a master. Years of training fighting together, trusting each other completely, made them a formidable duo where each covered the other's blind spots instinctively. But Anakin fought with a broken heart, recognizing some of those soldiers under the white helmets, men with whom he had shared trenches and dangerous missions, with whom he had joked and laughed. Something terrible was happening in the galaxy, something that went far beyond Palpatine's personal betrayal. When the last clone fell unconscious on the ground, Anakin ran back to the house, desperate to ensure Padme and the babies were safe and unharmed. She was hiding in the back room with Luke and Leia, pale with absolute fear but physically unharmed, and he hugged her tightly while checking the babies who cried frightened. Obi-Wan's communicator vibrated insistently with an urgent transmission from Mace Windu coming directly from Coruscant. The voice of the stern council master was tense and tired when he explained with quick words that all Jedi were being hunted by the clones throughout the entire galaxy. Order 66 had been activated, a terrible secret protocol that transformed the loyal clone soldiers into programmed assassins of the Jedi they swore to protect. Hundreds of Jedi had already fallen in the last hours, killed without a chance to defend themselves by the same troops that fought beside them for 3 years. Anakin felt bile rise in his throat as he understood the full extent of Palpatine's elaborate conspiracy over decades. Obi-Wan quickly informed Windu that Palpatine was the Sith Lord they had been seeking for so long, the final piece of the puzzle fitting with terrible and absolute clarity. Windu responded that he already strongly suspected after analyzing the patterns, that he would confront the Chancellor immediately with other masters, but that he urgently needed their help. The war they thought they were fighting was a complete lie, and now the real battle for the future of the Republic was just beginning. Anakin looked at Padme holding his children against her chest, every fiber of his being screaming to stay there and protect them from everything. "I can't leave you," he said with a voice broken by emotion. "Not now. Not when everything is falling apart around us and you need me." Padme touched his face tenderly, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. But her voice was firm and resolute when she said he needed to go, that it was the only way to truly protect them. Obi-Wan placed a heavy hand on his shoulder and said that Palpatine would never leave them in peace while he was alive and in power. The Sith Lord knew about Padme, probably knew about the babies through his spies, and would use that against Anakin at the first opportunity he had to manipulate him. The only way to truly protect his family was to end the threat at the root, destroy Palpatine before he completely consolidated his power over the galaxy and transformed the Republic into his personal empire. Anakin knew logically that Obi-Wan was absolutely right, but the pain of leaving his family so soon was almost unbearable, especially after nearly losing them in childbirth. He held Luke and Leia one last time before leaving, memorizing every detail of their tiny perfect faces. He promised them in emotional whispers that he would return, that he would make the galaxy safe so they could grow up in peace and freedom, that they would be a real family. Padme kissed him, both knowing that this could be the last kiss they would share, that he might not return from this mission. She said she trusted him completely, that she knew he would do the right thing and return to them somehow. Padme's family arrived quickly to protect her and the children, determined men and women of Naboo who promised to give their lives if necessary to keep the babies safe. Anakin and Obi-Wan departed in a fast ship, leaving Naboo behind as they headed back to Coruscant at maximum speed. Throughout the tense journey, Anakin remained in absolute silence, his mind divided between the urgent need to stop Palpatine and the constant fear of what could happen to his family in his absence. Obi-Wan didn't try to console him with empty words, knowing that sometimes silence was the only adequate answer for such a situation. When Coruscant appeared on the horizon, covered by the lights of billions of lives shining in the darkness of space, Anakin felt the darkness emanating from the heart of the city planet like an open wound. Palpatine was there, sitting on his throne of carefully constructed lies, manipulating the entire galaxy like pieces in a three-dimensional chess game. Rage burned in Anakin's chest like living fire, but it was a controlled and focused rage, not the blind and destructive fury that Palpatine had tried to cultivate in him for so long. He had something to fight for now, something infinitely more important than personal revenge or political power. Luke and Leia deserved to grow up in a world free from the suffocating darkness of the Sith, in a galaxy where they could live in peace, and Anakin would do absolutely anything to ensure that for them. The ship landed discreetly on an abandoned platform far from curious eyes, and the two Jedi departed in different directions, each with their own crucial mission. Obi-Wan would go to the temple to gather any surviving Jedi and coordinate the resistance, while Anakin had another more direct plan in mind that could end everything. Anakin walked through the familiar corridors of the Senate building, his Jedi-hood hiding his face from the guards who nervously patrolled the corridors. He knew going alone to Palpatine was extremely risky and possibly suicidal, but there was a chance, however small, of resolving this without more unnecessary bloodshed. Perhaps he could negotiate using his personal relationship with Palpatine, use what remained of that false friendship to convince him to stop the brutal hunt of the Jedi. It was a foolish and naive hope, he knew perfectly well, but he needed to try for Padme, for Luke, for Leia, for all the Jedi who were still fighting. The Chancellor's office was surprisingly unprotected when he arrived, without the usual guards, as if Palpatine was waiting for him specifically. The door opened with a simple touch, revealing the Sith Lord sitting calmly behind his ornate desk, that cruel and knowing smile on his thin lips. "Your place is by my side, Anakin," Palpatine said with a soft and poisonous voice that echoed through the office. "Together we can bring true order to this chaotic galaxy and save those you love." Anakin slowly removed his hood, revealing a face hardened by determination and the experience of becoming a father. "I will stand by your side," he lied deliberately, "if you stop the attacks against the Jedi immediately and withdraw Order 66. Palpatine laughed, a cold and cruel sound that echoed through the luxurious office, making Anakin's hair stand on end. "Do you think me so foolish, young Skywalker?" He stood up slowly, his dark presence in the Force pressing against Anakin like a crushing physical weight trying to suffocate him. I know Padme gave birth. I know exactly where they are. I know you would betray me at the first opportunity to protect your precious family you love so much. Anakin felt his blood freeze completely upon hearing those words, confirming his worst fears about Palpatine's knowledge. But one day you will be Darth Vader, Palpatine continued with absolute conviction. When you lose everything you love, when darkness is all that remains in your soul, you will finally join me as my apprentice. The implicit threat against his family was the final straw, and Anakin ignited his lightsaber with a roar of pure rage, all thought of negotiation evaporating. Royal guards appeared from the shadows like ghosts dressed in red, their force pikes activated with a threatening hum, surrounding Anakin from all sides strategically. Palpatine gave the attack order with a casual gesture of his hand, and the guards attacked in perfect unison, moving with deadly speed and precision that rivaled any Jedi. Anakin defended himself desperately, his saber spinning in a bright blue blur as he blocked lethal blows coming from all directions simultaneously. The guards were incredibly well trained, and there were at least 8 of them coordinating their attacks. For a terrible and desperate moment, Anakin thought he would be overwhelmed by the numbers, that he would die there without ever seeing his family again. Then the door exploded open in pieces and Obi-Wan came running in, his saber already ignited and ready, with Mace Windu right behind him emanating absolute determination. "I wouldn't let you come alone. Never," Obi-Wan said with a familiar half-smile, and Anakin felt immense relief at having his old master by his side again in this final battle. Windu completely ignored the royal guards and went straight for Palpatine, his unique purple saber colliding with the red blade that the Chancellor quickly drew from his sleeve with practiced movements. The battle between them was fierce and fast, 2 true masters of the Force facing each other with raw power that made the very air tremble and furniture fly. Meanwhile, Anakin and Obi-Wan fought against the royal guards in perfect synchrony, their sabers moving in absolute harmony, developed by years fighting side by side. One guard fell under Anakin's saber, then another under Obi-Wan's, their coordinated defense finally being broken by the combined skill of the 2 Jedi working together. Anakin felt the Force flow through him clear and luminous like never before, so different from the tempting darkness that Palpatine had offered for so long. He fought not for blind rage or destructive hatred, but for pure love, for the sacred chance to return home and embrace his children again. The penultimate guard fell with a coordinated strike, and the last was disarmed by Obi-Wan, and both quickly turned to see Windu press Palpatine against the wall, the Sith Lord finally showing clear signs of fatigue and growing desperation. Palpatine fell to his knees on the cold floor, his red saber rolling away with a metallic clink, defeated but still defiant in his yellowed eyes. Windu kept his purple blade pointed firmly at the Chancellor's throat, his voice cold and controlled when he spoke with absolute authority. "Give the order immediately to cease the attacks against the Jedi and you will survive to be appropriately judged by the Senate." For a tense moment it seemed Palpatine would arrogantly refuse, that he would choose to die right there rather than admit defeat before inferior Jedi. But then he smiled that characteristic cruel smile and spoke into the communicator with a defeated voice, ordering all clones throughout the entire galaxy to cease the attacks immediately and return to barracks for new orders. The order traveled through the communication waves, reaching clones throughout the galaxy in seconds, saving countless Jedi lives who were still desperately resisting. Anakin allowed himself a brief moment of growing hope, thinking that maybe, just maybe, everything would end well and he could return to Naboo, to his waiting family. But Mace Windu didn't lower his lightsaber yet, and there was something final and definitive in his dark eyes when he looked at the kneeling Palpatine. The Sith Lord perceived the intention and said, "You promised to judge me, Master Windu." Windu didn't respond with words, simply moved his saber in a quick and precise arc that cut through the air. Palpatine's head rolled across the marble floor, the cruel smile still frozen on his lifeless features as his body collapsed. Obi-Wan stepped forward shocked, his voice laden with disbelief. "Master Windu, you explicitly promised he would be judged by the Senate." Windu deactivated his saber with a final movement and looked at them with tired eyes that had seen too much. And he was judged, here and now in this moment, and deemed too dangerous to be left alive. The room fell into heavy silence for long moments, only the distant sound of Coruscant's air traffic filling the void left by the Sith Lord's death. Anakin looked at the lifeless body of the man who had almost completely corrupted him, feeling a strange mixture of deep relief and melancholic sadness for everything that could have been different. Weeks later, when order had been partially restored, Anakin was called before the complete Jedi Council to officially answer for having broken the code. He entered the council chamber expecting severe punishment, perhaps even permanent expulsion from the order, but mentally prepared to accept the consequences of his choices without regret. Windu spoke first with a grave voice, acknowledging that Anakin had fundamentally violated the oldest rules of the Jedi by secretly marrying and having children. But then Obi-Wan rose from his chair and defended his former Padawan with passion, eloquently pointing out that it was Anakin who discovered the Sith Lord's identity, who alerted the Council about Palpatine when he could have remained silent. Yoda struck his staff on the floor forcefully, silencing the entire room instantly. "Discover the Sith, young Skywalker did," he said slowly with his ancient and wise voice. "Save the Order from complete extinction, he helped. Forgiven he will be, but change deeply we must." The old Jedi Master looked around the chamber, with eyes that shone with wisdom. "About forbidden attachments, wrong perhaps we were for centuries," continued Yoda with growing conviction, "showed Skywalker that stronger love can make a Jedi, not weaker as we always believed." The room exploded in heated discussions about the uncertain future of the Order, about which ancient rules should change and which traditions should remain untouched. Anakin was respectfully dismissed while they still debated heatedly, finally free to return to Naboo, to waiting Padme, to growing Luke and Leia, to the family he had almost lost but could now openly embrace under the bright light of the stars without fear or shame.